So our last speaker for today is, in my mind, one of the great thinkers of our time who's finally solved the riddle of the pyramids. And in my mind, I've been to the Great Pyramid many times, read all those books, have a huge library. I've always been fascinated by it. And it wasn't until really I read Chris's book that I thought, okay, finally somebody's got the answers. And that is our next speaker, Christopher Dunn, the author of the Giza Power Plant. So let's have a nice warm welcome for Chris.
Well, thank you very much, David, and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jennifer, for always being there at these conferences. I have a wonderful time with the World Explorers Club, Adventures Unlimited, and just recently I have found a new family in Body, Mind, Spirit Journeys, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I'd also like to introduce to this lovely group my family, my wife, Gino, and my son Alex. I've got to give credit where credit is due, that the Giza Power Plant was just a tattered manuscript in my bottom drawer before I married Jean and before I met Jean. And we came together because I mailed it to her. She was living in Boston, up in New England, and I mailed her the manuscript, and she started to go through it. And I think ultimately we decided that in order to really give birth to this baby, we had to get married. So anyway, that's what we did, and until we did, the thoughts, the ideas, you know, they were a hodgepodge of chapters that were crafted, and Jean spent many hours working on the manuscript, fixing my commas, and because I always had too many of them, you know, typical Englishman. But anyway. That's my family in Danville, and of course the family that I recently became very fond of were Body, Mind, Spirit Journey, and they're wonderful people that actually went on the tour. It was an incredible experience for me, and I want to bring this up because we come together from different backgrounds, we come together from different parts of the country. And we come together with different ideas and different philosophies, but there's a common thread that runs through all of us. And one of the things that I noted as the 68 of us threaded our way through ancient Egypt and visited each temple and sampled the energies and the frequencies of each temple, of the pyramids, and then, of course, sampled the music of the Arabic music, the belly dancing, which I love. It drives my wife crazy, but that's another matter. I won't talk about it. But anyway, she needs to go to Egypt, I know. But anyway, as the tour progressed over 13 days, there was an incredible bonding between the people. And ultimately, when we came to my presentation, which was on the Saturday, the last day before we came back to the States. And by the way, I wondered why I was on the last day before we came back to the States. And it really didn't understand it, but I thought, okay, well, Andrea knows what she was doing. And indeed, Andrea did know what she was doing, because by the time it came down to my presentation, most of the background information, most of what I could actually teach or share with the group, they had already experienced. They had experienced the culture, they had experienced the energies of these sites. And so all I was left to do on that final day was to actually tell a story and bring everything together. And that story, to me, has become much richer, much deeper, broader than it was when the Giza Power Plant was published. And it was published in 1998. And it's 6 years later, and even after the book was first on the shelves, people would come to me and say, well, when are you going, what's your next book going to be about? And I don't know. I don't have another buck in me, you know. That was it. I just didn't want anything to do with it. Because I have a day job. I make money doing different things than writing books. And I didn't want to sacrifice, you know, a very good income to sit in a garret and be a thinker and a writer and while my family starves. So, so anyway, I wasn't interested in writing another book. And I didn't know if I ever would. Perhaps after I retire, but just recently, as events unfold, there is another buck in me that's bursting to get out, and there's a larger story that needs to be told. And hopefully, in the next year or so, I'll be able to tell that story. But thank you, thanks. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of it today. And I got to preface, there is a story that I would love to tell you right now, but it's still in the making. It's still unfolding, and basically that story is related to the technology and the ancient Egyptians' technology, the ancient Commission technology. And when I wrote the Giza Power Plant, the copy editor would come back to me and say, why do you keep qualifying everything you say with, now this is just speculation and, you know, this needs to be proven out. Just say it one time and then just write it like it was a done deal. So that's basically what I did, and I made that qualifying statement at the beginning of the theory on the Giza Power Plant, and then wrote it like, you know, that these events actually transpired. As it turns out, and I did it tentatively. I mean, when I wrote about it, you know, speculatively and tentatively, with no real firm conviction that, yeah, that's the way it was. But I believe in the next couple of years that I can actually do that. And in fact, I don't have to do it. The other people will do it. In other words, there are several technologies involved with the Giza Power Plant that will now become the focus of professionals in their particular fields. And I'm talking about seismic mitigation or attenuation technologies, which is basically the coupled oscillator theory, which we will talk about, and also the acoustics. And as we threaded through Egypt, and I was given the opportunity to speak to these 68 wonderful people crammed in a temple and sharing the love, you know, I mean, they're wonderful people. One of the things that I shared with them is that the ancient Egyptian science was based on sound. It was based on acoustics. And they worked with stone in a very sophisticated way, a very efficient way, by the way. And really, the quarrying techniques, the machining of the stone, while it's marvelous, it's incredible, and we're going to look at it, I'm at the point now in my studies where it's become a moot point. Because the technologies that were the objective of cutting these stones and shaping them in the way they shape them and putting them together the way they put them together, those technologies will be proven out. And the way they shape them and putting them together the way they put them together, those technologies will be proven out. And they will become a matter of record, a matter of scientific and record, and for future physicists and scientists to study and to work with. So that is the most pleasing part of it. I can't give you any details because, you know, I don't want, you know, counting chickens before they hatch, and then sometimes if you talk too much and things don't come to pass, you can be criticized. So basically where I am now, I want to tell a story of, or present with you a vision. And this is a vision, and I'm saying a vision in a I'm not using it literally, but it's the impression that I get when I look at this culture, this pre-dynastic culture. What happened to them? Where did they go? What do they look like? And basically what we're left with is just the skeleton of a civilization. When we go to Egypt, we're looking at the bones or the skeleton of the civilization, the stones that were left behind. But what does the flesh will look like? What is the spirit? What is the spirit? And that is most subtle. And you have to be very, very quiet, and you have to listen for that. And if you do listen, you can actually hear the frequencies of those temples, as people will attest to. Teresa is here. She will attest to the fact that, yes, she heard those frequencies. Christine heard the frequencies. And they are ever present. You can, the whole country from Luxor down to Cairo with the temples and the Nile resonates at particular frequencies. And so the vision I would like to give you is, if you just close your eyes and imagine the perfect environment for you. What is that perfect environment? And we really pay homage to the elders of the American Indians and the Egyptians, the old cultures who passed down the oral tradition, and they have an attunement with nature, with Mother Earth. They feel that connection with Mother Earth, and that is really a vision or a state of being that we want to be in that we feel connected, a connection with all that is, with our planet, with everybody on it, and even with other planets in the universe, that we feel that consciousness open up and we have that God consciousness, a connection. And really, when that happens, you don't need a temple, you don't need a priest, because you're already connected. As Stephen was saying earlier, you're already connected with God. And you don't need anybody to describe what the protocol is as far as getting to heaven. So, if you can imagine, though, that state of being could actually be accomplished by left-brain engineers. That's inconceivable, isn't it? That you'd have somebody who is totally, left brain, you've got to do this, this, and this, and through this you're going to achieve this, and then this, and this, and this. But isn't that what happens when you get acoustic engineers design a concert hall? And they design instruments, they work with science, they work with physics and mathematics, and they are very clearly defined formulas and algorithms that go into creating wonderful technologies. But they're all kind of left brain, right? And it's kind of difficult to survive in the left brain when you get so much pleasure over in the right brain. So, but if you don't have the distinction, or if both are open together and you live in both sides at the same time, that is the state of being that I actually envision the ancient Egyptians in, is that they are actually open all the time to the universe, and they achieve it with their technologies. They achieved it with their pyramids and the temples. That their acoustic science and what they designed into their civilization actually created a culture where people were in a state of cosmic consciousness constantly, because right now the energy of the sites is shut down. But there are subtle hints, and it's by examining the sites, the pyramids themselves, that you're able to actually get a feel for what it was like. And sometimes you may even achieve it if you stay too long in that coffer inside the king's chamber, because that could really open you up. And I've got to tell you, when I first started to write the Giza Power Plant, I poo-pooed all New Age theories about mystical experiences inside the Great Pyramid. Because I thought that, well, I'm just not going to convince anybody of the validity of any theory if I cannot actually prove it? Well, you know, some things really don't have to, you really can't prove, you have to experience. And after several trips to Egypt and several experiences where, you know, I've had odd things happen to me, I've become a believer that these energies that still exist were just the echoes of a civilization, the population of which were master engineers, musicians, and just very enlightened beings. But what happened? Now that's the key, and that is the cataclysm that Stephen was talking about, a cataclysmic event. And because of the nature of the technologies that they were involved with, because what they were doing is they were driving the planet, they were driving the Earth to harmony. They were attenuating the seismic activity or the seismic stresses in the Earth's plates and relieving those energies, taking the energies through the pyramids. But they were doing it in a very holistic way. In other words, if you've been involved in a musical group or a chorus, you know that when you get a group together and you start singing, you can actually, you know, the synergy of a chorus or a musical group can build a tremendous amount of energy. More than the sum total of the individual instruments or voices. So this is a phenomenon called nonlinear acoustics, where you have blending frequencies that actually combine to create more energy. And that's one of the areas of study that is going to be ongoing inside the Great Pyramid next year. But what happens, though, is you have a culture or a science that is drawing energy from the Earth through the pyramids, through the temples, and relieving the stresses in the planet, and actually driving the planet to harmony. Now, what happens there is that the planet is in tune with other planets, such as Vela X, which vibrates at the frequency of an F sharp. Funnily enough, the Great Pyramid, the King's Chamber, has the chord, the F sharp. It was discovered in 1995 by Tom Danley. And the human brain, it resonates at around 6 hertz. The frequencies in the King's Chamber resonate between 2 and 9 hertz. So when you have, all things have a particular resonance. And by the nature of the physical material, we have certain vibrations. And those vibrations actually are in harmony with all matter in some form or another. Now, if you throw in a lot of other frequencies, you could actually cancel out some of those frequencies, and so you become fairly dead, not as vibrant. But if you do have energies that are in harmony with you, then you're upbeat and you do become in harmony with your environment. And so you can actually create a synthetic environment where the human body responds to the frequencies in ways that are very beneficial, such as opening up the brain, you know, affecting the hippocampus in the brain, and really achieving a state of nirvana without having to pass out of the body. And really, in a situation like that, if you have a population who are affected like that, who needs anything else? Because we're all striving for something, right? There seems to be a certain amount of disquiet in everybody, that we're all yearning, we're all striving for something. And so that's kind of the vision that I had, that there was this fantastic civilization. The skeleton exists. A lot was stripped away by the cataclysm. The cataclysm a asteroid or a piece of a comet or hit the Earth and caused tremendous damage. Tsunamis probably scoured the face of the Earth, removing a lot of the civilization that existed at that time. The pyramids, of course, because of their nature, they were tuned to respond to Earth energies. And because of the design, they knew that they were working with a closed system. The Earth is a closed system, and the energies were a known quantity, but they were designed to maximize the throughput of that energy. So when energy was input from the outside, the pyramids became what you would call runaway vibrators, because they could not release the energy fast enough. They couldn't damp it, they couldn't pass it through fast enough, and so we have what we have in the Great Pyramid, which is evidence of how the pyramid functioned. And it was really, that was where I began, and studying the Peter Tompkins book, Secret of the Great Pyramids. And it was with that evidence, and I was working, strictly from my left brain, looking at the evidence within the Great Pyramid to determine just exactly what was going on. And the key that got me going, as far as what may have been going on, was what Stephen was referring to earlier, and that was the notes by Petrie when he noted that the King's Chamber had expanded over an inch, and the ceiling beams were cracked, and there was vitrification of the stone. And then, of course, more evidence followed that. But basically, I set myself a challenge, and it was that all evidence has to be explained. It has to find a logical purpose within the framework of the Giza Power Plant hypothesis. And if there was any evidence that showed up later, it either had to support the hypothesis, or then the hypothesis would have to be revised or even thrown out. That's the scientific method. You have to follow the evidence, and that's what I did. So what we have with the Great Pyramid is what they call a coupled oscillator. And a coupled oscillator is a device that is attached to a larger vibrating body, but it's tuned to a harmonic or the same frequency as the larger vibrating body. And once the oscillator is set into motion, then it will continue to draw energy from the larger vibrating body as long as that larger vibrating body continues to vibrate. So that was basically the fundamental hypothesis of how these Pernettas functioned. They functioned as coupled oscillators, and they still do. And there are still sites in Egypt that respond to the earth energies. You can hear it. You can hear it at Saqqara. Stephen had that one slide up of the temple at Saqqara where you just put your head inside the niche and you can hear that deep rumble, And I think David's mentioned something about it being from the buses in the parking lot, but I don't. I rejected that idea because I went out there one time and, in a taxi, and I still heard it. Okay, in the Great Pyramid, these were the anomaly. This is what everything in this inside here had to be explained. The descending passage, the ascending passage, these are 42 inches square. From the entrance down to the bedrock, you have a passageway that's straight within 20 thousandths of an inch. That's the thickness of a thumbnail. That is very, very precise for something like that. And from this point on down to the bedrock, through the bedrock to the subterranean chamber, which is about 200 feet, it is straight within 1/4 of an inch. Now, the significant part of this, and I mean, there could be, there's a long discourse just about the digging of the descending passage, because they claim that when Khufu was born, they started to build the pyramid to be his final resting place. Well, because of the nature of this particular passage, you could only allow one person at the workface at any given time, and then if you are using the tools that Egyptologists say were in the ancient Egyptian toolbox, then it would take more than 28 years for that one person to chisel out all that limestone. So even before they start to build the superstructure, you've already exceeded the life of the pharaoh just in digging the descending passage. And there are a lot of examples of that, particularly with the granite too. We'll talk a little bit about that. I asked why. Everything that I saw in there, I asked why? Why these granite plugs in the ascending passage? And the reason that was given was that, okay, well, they put these granite plugs there so that it would keep tomb robbers from getting to the main chamber. When really, as I say in my book, that the only thing that they achieved was to draw attention to the fact that, hey, we got some granite here, maybe there's something behind it. And indeed, some smart people said, yeah, okay, let's dig around these plugs because it's soft limestone around them. And that's how you actually gain access to the ascending passage today. And then coming up the ascending passage to the Grand Gallery, it opens up 28 feet high, 82 inches wide at the bottom, and 42 inches wide at the top. Horizontal passage to the Queen's Chamber. A lot of anomalies in the Queen's Chamber. Early explorers said that the walls and ceiling were coated with salt up to an inch thick. And the question is why? The lower parts of the pyramid did not have the same incrustations of salt. And these shafts that come into this chamber actually were not connected originally. They were terminated 5 inches short of coming in through to the chamber itself. And it wasn't until 1872 when Wayman Dixon, early explorer, detected a crack in the south face of that chamber, and had somebody chisel out the limestone and discovered the southern shaft. And we've probably all heard about the exploration of the southern shaft in 1993 by Rudolf Gantenbrink, and he sent a robot